Hello, and welcome to the Walrus Talks at Home, Place and Belonging, presented by the Belonging Forum. I'm Jennifer Hollett. I am the Executive Director of the Walrus, and I'm also your host and moderator. We are thrilled to be joining you online, bringing people together across the country and beyond, live in conversation. I'd like to start by acknowledging the land that I'm on, here in Toronto, Ontario, Toronto. A land acknowledgement helps us recognize history, thinking about how it informs where we are now and what changes can be made going forward in a commitment to reconciliation. Our office at the Walrus and where I am are located within the bounds of Treaty 13, signed with the Mississaugas of the Credit. The land is also the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and the Wendat peoples. Toronto is home to many diverse First Nations, Inuit, and Métis peoples. We're honored to contribute to a tradition of storytelling, and we welcome you to reflect on the land that you're on, wherever you're joining us from today. As part of the ongoing work of reconciliation, if you haven't already or done so recently, we encourage you to read the 94 calls to action recommended by the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. A bit about the Walrus. The Walrus is Canada's conversation. We cover stories across Canada to offer a deeper understanding of who we are for those inside and outside the country. This year, from tariffs to taunts of becoming the 51st state to tariffs again, Canada is the conversation, and the country is standing strong. We are responding to this moment with facts, analysis, even some humor. You can find our work online at thewalrus.ca, in print, on newsstands, or by subscribing to The Walrus. You can also listen to our podcasts and stories online and take part in events like this one. This work is independent. It is powered by our community of donors, supporters, and partners. Thank you to our partner, the Belonging Forum, for making this event possible. To start tonight's conversation, please welcome Kim Samuel, who is the founder and chief architect of the Belonging Forum. Hi, Kim.
Hi, Jen. I'm joining tonight from Cape Town, South Africa. Since we're talking about place, I can tell you at this moment I feel especially connected with the place that represents this conversation on belonging. I want to give just a little bit of context about the value of place and be quite brief because we have so many wonderful talkers to hear from tonight with great examples. At the Belonging Forum, we just wrapped up our fifth global symposium in Toronto. We had folks come from all over the globe to talk about building a world where we all belong. And at that symposium, we launched the first ever Charter for Belonging. Importantly for us tonight, the Charter recognizes that our connection to place is essential to our experience of belonging. And by place, I'm referring to our homes, our workplaces, third spaces, digital spaces, our communities, and our relationship with the natural world as part of nature ourselves. Dominic Richards, a visionary architect and legendary UK-based placemaker, uses human-centered design elements to cultivate connection. Dominic once told me, either you design for belonging or you end up with isolation. And so when we're creating new spaces, we must be intentional because belonging does not happen by accident. It has to be a present and significant consideration at every stage of the process, conceptualizing, designing, building, operating, and maintaining. Because belonging in physical spaces is not a choice between four walls versus open concept. It's about everything that happens within that space, the environment, the friendships, imagination, and hope that can either flourish or perish. Unfortunately, the biggest barrier we face in this field, and most others, to be frank, is that belonging has been an afterthought for much too long. Look at trends in urban planning, for example. Our streets are organized in grid like patterns to accommodate cars above all else. We recognize and perpetuate clear divisions between my space and your space. and more, we're seeing the loss of community hubs that foster connection. Here, I'm thinking about neighborhood pubs closing down, libraries operating in reduced hours, places of worship being sold off to developers, and local rec centers offering less and less programming for residents. Activist and scholar Jane Jacobs famously asked, "Are cities for cars or for people?" And that cuts to the core of what we're talking about here tonight, whether you're looking at a community of 10 or 10 million, because it forces us to confront an even bigger question. What do we value? And what is the value of place within it? If ultimately we decide that we value human connection and well being, it's imperative that we build belonging in mind of everything that we do. And I would argue that we do that by designing not just for the structure of a given place, but also and equally so for the spirit, creating and conserving, planning and protecting and rewilding, sensing when to move forward and knowing when to simply hold the space so that belonging can come into place. I know that we're about to hear a lot of examples and to be able to see belonging come to life in relation to place and in practice. So, Jen, I'm going to turn this back to you to lead us forth. And thank you.
Thank you, Kim. And I have my notes right here from the Global Symposium. So thank you so much for opening us up. With Walrus Talks at home, each speaker will give their talk one after the other live, and this is followed by a moderated Q&A session with the talkers and you, our audience at home. So feel free to submit your questions at any point here in the comments section. And when you post your question, let us know where you are tuning in from. We also encourage you to share this conversation on social media. So whatever platform is your favorite, you can tag us at the Walrus and use our hashtag Walrus Talks. Tonight, we'll be hearing from Michelle Hoar, Project Director, Hey Neighbour Collective, Fellow Morris J. Wosk Center for Dialogue, Simon Fraser University. Anna Gallagher-Ross, Senior Manager of Programming at the Bentway. Jorge Garza, Director, Networks for Change, Tamarack Institute. And Osa Kachan, CEO and Chief Librarian at Halifax Public Libraries. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll start things with Michelle Hoar. Welcome back, Michelle.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Thanks so much for the invitation to be one of the Walrus Talkers tonight. My name is Michelle Hoar. I am joining from Vancouver, which is the unceded ancestral territories of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. I have had the pleasure since 2019 of being the project director for the Hey Neighbour Collective. The Hey Neighbour Collective is a collective impact project. It's an initiative that brings together all sorts of different types of organizations that are interested in building neighborly social connection and resilience in multi-unit housing specifically. So this group of almost 20 organizations now came together because of concerns around local and global trends in rising loneliness and social isolation, and a curiosity around what we could do within housing contexts to mitigate that. So we bring together housing operators, community-based nonprofits, city governments, regional governments, health authorities, housing industry associations, researchers, consultant groups, all to look at how we can build connection and resilience in existing multi-unit housing, but also how we can do a better job of designing our new dense, more vertical housing typologies so that they intentionally are fostering neighborly social connections, mutual support, conditions for aging in place, resilience, capacity to manage, the everyday personal crises to, major climate events or natural disasters. So that is what we all come together and work on together in lots of different ways. We have partners that we call demonstration partners, and they are actively scaling up programs within housing that build the capacity and leadership of residents to get to know each other, to organize together, to do all sorts of things that actually build up the kind of individual and collective social health of that building community. So when we started off in 2019, as I said, we came together because of concern around loneliness and isolation and interest in how we could tackle that within the housing sector. But not just the housing sector, we bring in public health and local governments, like I say, and others. And when we started, I would say there were a certain number of folks who really got the deeper significance of this work, but many also kind of thought, "Oh, that's a sweet project, making places more neighborly." But then we had the pandemic, and then on the West Coast, we had the heat dome, which killed almost 700 people in 72 hours. And all of a sudden, the the narrative and the mindset really shifted around this work, and we realized, oh, social connectedness is actually really, really critical in this challenging polycrisis within which we all find ourselves, where we have not just loneliness and social isolation and decreased feelings of belonging and inequitable sense of belonging, but also a rapidly aging population that we have not planned very well for. Um, Climate events, you name it. We have so many intersecting crises right now, and we're really starting to see that working within housing contexts can really help us to build the social connections that help us to manage all of these things together. So we like to say in Canada that housing is a human right and that we recognize it as a social determinant of health, but we don't really action that in a significant way. And I think this is a moment where we need to double down on that, but we also really need to be thinking about housing as much more than four walls and a roof. Housing is critical social infrastructure. It is economic infrastructure. It is health infrastructure. It is emergency preparedness infrastructure. And right now, the housing reality for Canadians is very inequitable. If you are a homeowner, you get to put down roots in a community for a long time and build that sense of belonging with your neighbors, with your community. You get to engage. If you are a renter, and particularly low income renter, or you're living in secondary market rental housing, you are very precarious and you are often having to hop from community to community or region to region or province to province even. So our access to the fundamentals of belonging really are quite tied to our housing reality. So I think we are finding ourselves at a really huge important moment right now with federal attention finally um, really focused on building more non-market housing in particular. But I think it's imperative that we really be thoughtful about this opportunity and don't waste it. Because if we focus solely on building quickly and looking at quantity and talking about units instead of talking about homes and looking at quality and looking at all the things that housing can do for us, we are going to miss out on multitudinous potential benefits of this public investment. So there is a lot of great information and best practice around how to design and program housing so that it actually is bringing all these different social health and belonging benefits. And we really hope to see that kind of information make its way into new strategies and investments around housing.
Imagine it's a hot summer evening in Toronto. You're walking beneath the Gardiner Expressway. Above you, cars rush by, but below, something quite different is taking place. You pass a cluster of benches that is also a colorful public art installation. People sit talking, watching, resting. Children shriek and play in the nearby water feature. Music plays over the speakers, and lights turn on across the site as the sun begins to set. Roller skaters glide past, weaving in and out of people walking and chatting. A lesson begins, some participants shaky on their wheels but laughing, eager to learn. This is the Bentway, a public space founded in 2015, which reimagines a divisive piece of infrastructure that separated downtown from the waterfront as a connector of neighborhoods and people. The Bentway is an essential backyard for over 200,000 residents living in towers along the expressway, but also a destination for the city at large. It is a place to learn to skate in winter or summer, to encounter an interactive work of public art, a place to walk your dog or to meet a friend. The Bentway is a programmer of arts, recreation, and education, a steward of an essential public space. We're a designer and advocate of new public spaces. The Bentway is many things, but tonight I want to talk about one crucial role that the Bentway plays, which is as a public health tool. Across Canada, and especially here in Toronto, it can be surprisingly difficult to meet someone new, to talk to a neighbor, or even to feel that you belong. The pandemic didn't start this problem, but it made it worse. Toronto has been dubbed the loneliest city in our nation. According to the Toronto Foundation's 2023 Vital Signs report, 43% of Torontonians say that they never see their neighbors, and 37% feel lonely at least 3 days in the week. This isn't just a question of mental health, it's one of physical health too. Chronic loneliness also poses increased risk of heart disease, dementia, depression, and even early death. So, with social isolation on the rise, and in a city that is increasingly hard to live in, how do we soften the barriers that separate us? This question guided the Bentway's 2024 summer season, Softer City, a program of public art, events, workshops, and recreation. Applying an interdisciplinary lens, we worked with local and international artists, designers, and public health experts to explore soft strategies in city building, creative interventions that invited interactivity, social connection, and co-creation. To name just a few, we had a performance that invited you to walk hand in hand with a stranger and see the city from their perspective. We hosted a 2,000-person yoga class centered on meeting one another. We created a series of sculptures that created new forms of supported seating. We hosted roller skate parties where you learn to skate. We hosted a 2.7-kilometer run of larger-than-life dominoes that ran across several city neighborhoods and was set up and set off by over 300 neighborhood volunteers. In all of these experiences, you were not just a spectator, but an active and welcomed participant, a co-creator in the experience. And to deepen this work, we teamed up with researchers from the Dalai Lama School of Public Health at the University of Toronto and GAL New York to produce a research report on the role of public space in combating loneliness and in order to explore how we might build a softer and more connected city together. Our research found that the Bentway is, quote, a sticky space, meaning it's a space that you don't just pass through, but you're invited to stay in. We found that for every 4 people who pass through our space, 1 stays. We also found that seating invited you to stay and made a difference in social connection and belonging. 71% of people surveyed by us said it enhanced and made more meaningful their interactions. And over half of our respondents noted that our green spaces increased their sense of connection to space and their sense of belonging, while areas which featured public art saw a 20% rise in social interaction as compared to areas without. Overall, the Bentway's design and programming across the summer encouraged social connection. 67% of visitors engaged with one another during the visit. In fact, conversation was the most common activity found on our site, and these conversations were intergenerational. We also found that the Bentway is simply a place to just be. 1 in 5 of our visitors just people watched, finding healing in the presence of others. And being around others also increased feelings of safety. Only 3% of visitors reported feeling unsafe at the Bentway, compared to 15% in public spaces across the city. Feeling safe, as we all know, is crucial to being open to social connection. Ultimately, the large majority of respondents said their visit to the Bentway improved their physical and mental health and their sense of belonging and social connection. Softer City provided learnings that are simple but crucial. It showed how the creation of a series of invitations, whether to take a seat, participate in a program, or just to be near others, can create belonging. We began knowing that public spaces make cities more inviting and conducive to forming connections, but we didn't quite understand how vital they are to our well-being in our neighborhood. And we continue to build these learnings into our work today, in our current but also our future public spaces. As we found, public spaces aren't just luxuries, they're critical health infrastructure. Thank you.
Thanks so much for joining us today. I'm joining you from the lands of the Ganingahaga Nation, Jojage, also known as Montreal. And I'd love to share with you this quote. This is from Kim's book on belonging. And I like starting with quotes because it helps me ground myself. And also, to me, it's a way of honoring the important work that has happened in communities and in places over time. So the quote says, "It's both in our best interest, as well as our responsibility as individuals and as collectives, to extend the belonging of home place to all people in our societies, as well as to the lands and waters, animals and other beings in the environment. This is the heart of responsible dependence. It's also one of the keys to our future survival." So what I just read resonates so much with the stories that we hear often through our working communities. At the Tamarack Institute, we have mobilized thousands of individuals to see belonging as something that it's not just a nice to have, but actually vital to the health of our communities. When we think about places, I want you to close your eyes and think about your most favorite place in the world. Just think about it. I'm sure that whatever comes to your mind right now is somewhat connected to relationships in most cases, or a very joyful memory of being present with someone. This is the magic of places that we see in our work with communities that we refer to as relational infrastructure. Relational infrastructure is intangible, unlike physical infrastructure. It's something that we cannot see, but we feel it. We deeply feel it when it's in places because that's what creates beautiful, meaningful memories. And we deeply feel it when it's lacking. That's what we experienced throughout the pandemic. So I'm holding the conversation, grounding it on these thoughts about relational infrastructure, because those places that are thriving, that are vibrant, are the ones that are able to create connection, to create relationships between individuals. Those are places that have a sense of meaning and purpose, and they go beyond just a park. They are part of an ecosystem of nurturing relationships. I'll give you an example of a community that we have been working with. It's the Tri-Cities community in British Columbia. If any of you is here, thank you for being here. And this community is bringing together 3 municipalities with different local governments, newcomer groups, as well as community health practitioners to build a project on intergenerational belonging. So the work is deeply rooted in place, is deeply rooted in activating this relational infrastructure, whether it's a community garden, local library, or a community center. Those are the spaces that create connection. So as we think about places, I want us to think about the relational infrastructure as something that is essential to invest in, because these are the connections that make spaces livable. These are the connections that can also break silos and that can also ultimately build belonging. The challenge that we hold collectively is really not just about building beautiful parks. It's also about ensuring that places contribute towards creating connection and care. Vibrant places bring everyone together because they provide a sense, as I mentioned, of meaning and purpose. And they enable us to experience belonging. As we continue reflecting the value of places, yeah, especially third spaces in building belonging, I want us to think that static assets alone are not enough. The relational infrastructure of a place is the dynamic engine that generates belonging.
Hi, everyone. I'm Kachan. I'm coming to you from Toronto, but I work in Halifax. in Mi'kma'ki. So delighted to speak to you all tonight. I'd like to talk about public libraries and more broadly, public institutions and the role that we can play in creating belonging. Um, for me, everybody has a library story. My library story began many, many years ago. My family immigrated to Canada. Swedish was our home language. And it was at the library near where I grew up, the Saskatoon Public Library's main branch, with this magical Pooh Corner Children's Room where I explored an endless array of materials, felt the richness of a collection that felt like it went on and on and on. I made friends, I participated in programs, and many years later, I worked at Saskatoon Public Library as a young librarian. Today, I spend my days as a chief librarian and CO for Halifax Public Libraries, and people often say to me, "Oh, you're a librarian, you must love books." And I do, but I love people more. My work and that of my colleagues across the country is all about supporting the information needs and well being of individual community members and also creating collective or societal well being. And the evidence is really strong. Regular library use improves the mental health of people, reduces loneliness, it improves public safety. It also, in many, many ways, improves health outcomes, language literacy, employability, our empathy for one another, and the GDP. So we kind of hit all the marks. Because nothing we do has user fees, it is truly for everyone. And this helps make public libraries one of the most trusted institutions in the community. And I'm so glad we're in communities and neighborhoods large and small from coast to coast to coast. Now, the way public libraries, particularly over the past decade or so, have transformed ourselves is a remarkable Canadian success story. And I say this with great pride. We in Canada are moving the needle on what a public library can be. My colleagues and I arrive at work daily thinking about how we can create the conditions for people of all ages, from 1 to 101, from across all socioeconomic backgrounds. Um, those who arrived in Canada alongside those whose families have been here for generations or always. And we want them to gather in the public realm and feel like they belong. In a nutshell, we're providing equitable access to the widest range of ideas and information. We're creating a place where everyone should feel at home. And as such, we are one of those foundations of democracy. So, an informed public learning, living alongside one another is makes for a wonderful place to be. Now, over the last few years, we've taken those concepts and we've applied them in some really interesting ways. We've included some fundamental policy changes. So, if you went to the library as a child like I did, you may have amassed some overdue charges. Over the past few years, we've actually identified the overdue charges placed an undue barrier for maybe some of those families and individuals who needed us the most. People who didn't have reliable transportation to bring their books back, people who maybe worked odd hours. um, there's much less shushing in libraries. We actually realize that sometimes quiet is required, and sometimes more conversation is what will bring us to a better place. More libraries, modern libraries, are built to invite people to bring food with them, and food is such a wonderful way to connect with community. So bringing coffee, bringing your lunch, they all invite people to spend longer time at their library, and sometimes it's a library that's providing the coffee and the snacks. Breaking bread builds community, and it's fascinating. In my observations as a librarian, I will watch and I notice when somebody holds a cup of coffee in their hand, they're more likely to talk to a stranger. It is almost like a security blanket. They're not alone, they've got a coffee, they feel a little bit braver. We leave our Wi-Fi on 24 hours a day with an eye to digital equity, so thinking about how we can support members of our community to stay connected to those they love around the world, even if they can't afford home internet. Our spaces and services have changed as well. And so when we think about how we spend our time, we've worked really hard to promote independence for those who want it. So if you're running in and you know what you want and you grab your book, we shouldn't stand in the way of that moving smoothly. That also means that it preserves our staff time for more transformative rather than transactional conversations. People will often stop to tell me their library story, and they tell me about a local library staff member who was the first person who remembered their name. We can be a place of refuge when things are difficult, and a community is facing crisis or the climate is hard to handle. In a survey we did with our community a few years ago, we asked people when the library had had the biggest impact on their lives. While every story was unique, there was a thread that went through them, and that was at times of life transition. New parents talked about needing to find other new parents in the community who then became their friends for today and tomorrow. We heard from teens who felt out of sync and needed a soft place to land. Heard from people coming out of rehab who needed to change patterns on how they spent their day. It is a place where you can arrive alone but not feel alone, and you can stay all day if you like. You can watch the Olympics, you can belt out Taylor Swift hits with your community members. The built environment is also critical. You take a look at new libraries, you'll note that they have many windows, transparent buildings that allow the glow of the people and activities to shine into the street as a beacon to draw people in. Comfortable seating, tucking your feet up. People tell us that they care, they feel cared for in their public libraries. And of course, with that uh, built environment, we also think a lot about accessibility. And we speak about that in the most comprehensive terms, not wheelchair ramps, but not only that. Nuance requires much more thoughtfulness. So soft lighting in some areas, brighter lighting for people who have poor vision in other areas, noisy and quiet. We can build our spaces to think about how we can live together and alongside each other. I want to end with just another comment on my last comment, really around creating the conditions for more civil discourse. So belonging requires us also to feel free to speak up, and that ability to share our points of view, to be respected for those. Jan Gehl talks, the Danish urbanist talked a lot about accidental collisions. So creating those conditions for people to bump up against somebody in their community who has had a different lived experience, who has a different point of view. This is the counterpoint to the algorithms that feed us the points of view we already hold and settle us into a more polarized state of being. So, even at our library, we've had workshops that encourage people to practice saying, tell me more when confronted with a view that varies from their own. So every day we remind ourselves we're in the people business and that all we have, all the books, all the space belong to the people. And the role of those who work in a library is to maximize the impact of that public investment for the public good. Thank you.
Have to hold up my local card here. I love what it says. Freedom to read 'em, Toronto Public Library. Thank you so much. Kachan just now, Michelle Hoar, Anna Gallagher-Ross, and Jorge Garza. All right, we are excited to open this up. Let us know where you are joining us from right now. Tonight, we have audience members registered from all over. Hello to Wolfville, Surrey, Cochrane. Hi to Whitehorse, Mississauga, Fort Francis, Laval. We also have people joining us from around the world. Hello to London, New York, Boston, Elkmount, Wisconsin. Excellent. Thank you all so much for joining us. A reminder, we are moving to the Q&A portion, so if you have a question, it's not too late. Please submit it via the chat. Now I'd like to welcome back our talkers, and Kim Samuel, just turn on your cameras. Excellent. Come on back to the Zoom room for our Q&A session, and I am excited to get into it. I have a few questions to kick us off. Michelle, I'd like to start with you. I'm in a high-rise condo, and in my building, people are more likely to speak with the dogs, not the owners. So what are some of the first steps we could, it's just true. So what are some of the first steps, to create a sense of belonging with neighbors who were living very closely to each other, but we actually might not know each other?
Yeah. There's actually a book that was just released by a Copenhagen organization called The Paradox of Proximity, right? So you would think if you've got lots of neighbors in a small space, there's more opportunity to get to know each other. But actually the reverse is often true. And that's often because of the way our buildings are designed, but also that there isn't that relational infrastructure that Jorge talked about and that Kim also mentioned, um, that kind of helps people to get to know each other. So you're right, pets, dogs are an incredible way for people to connect. Other things that really help in buildings are, if there is space outside or on the roof or in a courtyard, gardens, community gardens, um, uh, or play areas for kids. So we often talk about kind of three key things that create these kind of safe spaces for connection. So pets are one, kids are another, gardens are a third. So if you can incorporate any of those things into the design of your building, but also into the social life of the building, like if there is an unused space that could be a garden or that could be a dog run or that could be a space for kids to play, then that's one kind of design alteration you could look at. But sometimes you don't have those design options or those changes that you can make. So sometimes it just takes a willing resident to start something up and to talk to the building manager or the property manager and say, "Hey, can I use this room for a movie night? And would you send out, an email to all the residents, or could I put the poster in the elevator?" So sometimes just takes a little bit of a catalyst. Um, it can be hard though to sustain that if it's just resident volunteers. So what we really have learned is that if you really actually want to maximize those opportunities, you actually need your housing organization, whether that's a strata if you live in a condominium, or a landlord if you're a renter, or a co-op board if you're in a co-op, or whatever it might be. There needs to be some kind of high level commitment to residents connecting and getting to know each other. And if you can get that, then it starts to make you rethink, okay, well, how do we communicate? What opportunities, what physical opportunities do we have? What resources could we bring to this? So if there is some resourcing, some commitment, and some coordination, then those residents who step forward can be supported and mentored and coached, and that work can sustain itself over time, so that one person becomes three-person, becomes 12, becomes more over time.
Thank you. Kim, you highlighted how urban planning often prioritizes cars over people and the loss of community that comes with that. I also know that you do a lot of traveling in your work. Are there any cities or projects that come to mind that get it right in terms of that design, where the design strengthens belonging?
Yeah. I I would look no farther than to Anna and to the Bentway, honestly, as an excellent example, and maybe to share a little bit why. This must sound funny to you, Anna, because I'm talking about your work, but I'm a huge fan of the Bentway, and here's what's in there. One is that you're designing not just for people to come, but with the people who are coming. A friend of mine, and a friend of you, Jen, another Jen, Jennifer Corriero, who founded Taking It Global. Her a son goes to school in the area of the Bentway, and there's an amazing program that they're, as a family, that they're part of, and he's part of. So the outreach is constant. It's also about using land that would not otherwise be seen as beautiful. It is now. I spend a lot of time in the UK, and perhaps another example to give, although it's a rural one, is called the Eden Project in Cornwall, which is this wonderful space that brings a lot of people and is all based on our connection as part of nature and with nature. And this was made out of abandoned old quarries, cement quarries. And so I actually love the vision, and it takes a vision, and I suppose takes a village as well to bring this to life. But it only works, right, if you create these spaces, if there's a will to do it, if you have um, um, uh, a mayor who is all about belonging and connection, as Toronto does, and that when there is investment that is needed, that it comes there. But I think what makes the beautiful narrative, the beautiful word picture that you painted for us is true of everywhere. These are vibrant spaces, and most important, I would say, is that they need to be accessible to all and used by all, no matter where you live. So that also goes to public transportation and universal design as well as being important.
Well, Anna, of course, I'm going to bring you in. I was at that 2,000 person yoga session that you mentioned. In your talk, you used the word sticky.
Mm.
So, how do you create a sticky place?
Mm.
It's a great question. And I think a lot of us have spoken already about amenities. I think that it's so important and vital to think about some, really simple things that you can have in a space that make people want to stay. Some people have in the chat have been asking about what are low cost solutions to inviting people into this public space. And, we have electrical outlets across our site so people can come and charge their phone. We have seating that's supportive across the site that invites people to sit down and not, continue their journey. Our lighting fixtures are on 24 hours. And so they are on at the times when people might not feel invited into the space. So at night, we are lit up and vibrant and welcoming folks in. That might be a really boisterous event that we're hosting, or it might be a more calm evening where people just feel that they can be invited in. And in our research, we found that these sort of basic offerings actually add up to creating really meaningful invitations into the space.
I love that. Osa, you mentioned the shushing. I do think a lot of people think of the libraries, at least when we were growing up, as a place that one might be shushed, and that there's less of that, but also there's sometimes, space for sound. I'd love to open that up. Ingrid in Toronto asks, at large, how does sound and noise impact belonging? Where is it a strength, and then where might it exclude people?
Well, I think we can all probably think about days when we were seeking respite and days when we were seeking more boisterous connection. So I think all of us, it's not that there are the noisy people and the quiet. I think we all, if we reflect on ourselves, have days where we seek more or less sound and ambient noise. So I think it's an interesting challenge. It's not a difficult thing. I think one of the things I really appreciated about Kim's opening remarks was to be really thoughtful about this. Right? So you create great wide open sight lines. Well, there are acousticians and engineers who can help create that and not have it be an enormously noisy place. So we have wonderful technologies. We have wonderful ways to design spaces. I encourage anybody who drops into Halifax to stop by our central library. It is wide open and bright, but I can show you 4 pockets where you could hear a pin drop. So part of it is the sifting and sorting of people and their interests. Sometimes it's about creating spaces that deaden noise. So we have in some of our areas, we have, for example, what they almost look like a diner booth, but they have a roof over them and sound absorption panels. So people can be present in the larger space, but if they're sensitive to noise, they can find an option that is more comfortable for them. So I think there is a real desire to try to be very broad in what we think of as accessibility. I've heard from parents of children on the autism spectrum who never felt they could bring their children to public spaces because they weren't sure when there might be an outburst. So, what does that mean from a service perspective for us to be able to have spaces that if that parent needs just a really, really quiet space for their child, we can make that happen in a very easy way. We can also improve our built environment to be more amenable. So it's something we give so much thought to. I love the comment about basic amenities. Washrooms are hard to find.
Oh,
Um, Water fountains are hard to find, plugins, Wi-Fi. When we think about creating welcoming spaces, some of it's the energy, some of it's the beautiful furnishing and the comfortable surroundings, but some of it is truly the basics people need to get through the day. So it can be both the sort of architecturally interesting and then just the basic practicalities of life.
yeah, and being able to access a bathroom or charge
Mm.
your phone without having to purchase some things
Yeah,
as well.
right.
Yeah. Jorge, question for you. How do you approach building relationships in communities where there might be distrust or we're at a time of growing social polarization when that might be in the mix?
Thanks for the question, Jennifer. And it's important to ground this work in equity. So the work on places cannot, and building belonging cannot be separated from equity. And I'm saying this because I spoke earlier about this relational infrastructure in order to create vibrant places. So when we see polarization in places, it's not because people are naturally unable to collaborate or because people don't trust each other just because that's the case of it. There's more than that. And that more piece has to do with the failure of community engagement processes that have led people to exhaustion, that have led people to feeling marginalized, to feeling that their voices don't matter. So building vibrant spaces is also about engaging individuals into having authentic conversations, respectful dialogues in which we recognize that we might not fully agree on everything, but we agree that it's important to move forward, that it's important to nurture these places despite our differences. So that's the essence of democracy. And to us, that's the essence of building belonging. So through our work, we have seen the magic that can happen when individuals feel that they have agency, that they can shape the spaces that are next to them. I'll give one example. There was this municipality in Ontario that last year they were feeling very discouraged about being able to create a space in which the community felt that they were represented. So over time, through coaching and access to resources and collaboration and community engagement, they were actually able to mobilize residents that were usually unlikely allies, people that didn't know each other, to build a community mural at the heart of the city. And the work was featured in local media. It created a sense of pride, and it was just inspiring to see residents coming together and creating something together. To me, that's a manifestation on what can happen when we're able to collaborate. But again, we need to nurture that relational infrastructure to create those vibrant places, and that means collaboration.
Okay, thank you. I want to get a few more questions in from the audience. Sandra asks, how about older members of our communities, a rising demographic? They want to be involved and engaged. How do we capture the information we need to understand how to do that? Kim, I know you've worked with people of all ages. Thoughts on how we engage our elders?
Uh, Thank you. I'm especially passionate about older people and their right to belong. And in terms of the engaging, I'd begin with the with, not for. Um, that we need to really be involving older people as leaders, right? In telling whether it's government, whether it's the library, whether it's a Bentway, and so forth, what it is that's needed, because that's where the knowledge comes from. And I see that with everybody, but especially with older people, there still seems to be this tendency to assume that decisions have to be made for them, which is not correct. I think design is really important, that we need to make sure that if someone has mobility issues, that these are overcome and not made in the way of having it be onerous to get around. And I see this a lot with people with disabilities, going back almost 3 decades to my father, who had a brain injury and then had acquired a lot of disabilities, was using a wheelchair. And then what we found out was accessible. It was, yes, this is accessible if you can all lift the wheelchair up to the next place. And those kind of things stay with you, as all of our experiences do. I think it's also too a moment, and then I could go on about this for a while. A moment to talk about intergenerational ways of being, not simply as solutions, but the absolute joy of uh, of creating the space, or what I say, holding the space, which all of you do, for people to meet others that are not maybe in their age group, to not have assumptions made that older people only want to hang out with older people, which doesn't make sense. And I want to pick up a word that Jorge said, so important. in belonging is democracy. You talk about democracy, and I think that we also need to maintain the uh, the vigilance about not ever letting democracy slip. And I wanted to say everyone has a story about libraries. My grandmother started to take me to the Port Credit Public Library when I was 4 years old, and that was the making of a great intergenerational relationship.
Mm.
Thanks.
Well, I'd like to send this next question to Osa. Maria asks, I'm wondering what your thoughts are about the fact that all these places that bring people together are the exact places that are most at risk due to budget cuts.
Mm.
Today is a budget day in Canada. It seems that they are cost saving places as they support mental health and wellness, but this is not included in the cost analysis.
Mm.
Any thoughts about this? And Osa, I can imagine this is something that you and other chief librarians are constantly navigating.
We are. There is nothing that happens in our community that is not crossing the threshold of the public library. So we are very much on the front line of seeing, where there are cracks and who is falling through those cracks. And that's a big piece of the work that we do. I will say in the last 5 to 10 years, we have leaned in very heavily on supporting our staff in their training, in making sure that um, they have the skills. We do so much de-escalation of the course of the day. There was an interesting study, it was in LA many years ago, about when they closed the public library, and immediately on the Mondays when the library closed, they saw a spike in people being victims of crime and people being perpetrators of crime. And so there is so much in the subtle coming together with dignity that saves us money across so many of our service areas. So I think we in the library world are continuing to push that message, because in fact every person we serve well in a library is a person who may not need to go to a hospital, may not need to ask for police assistance, or and so there is, it's an ongoing challenge. Many people have an outdated view of what our daily life is like, and so we'll continue. This tonight is a great opportunity to talk about it, and we'll continue to work to see that recognition.
Excellent. Well, unfortunately, we have reached the end of our Q&A session. I want to say thank you again to all of our talkers as they turn off their cameras and wave us goodbye. Thank you again to our speakers, Michelle Hoare, Anna Gallagher-Ross, Jorge Garza, and Osa Kachan, as well as Kim Samuel. If you enjoyed today's event, we have more coming up at the Walrus. On Wednesday, November 12th, join us in Vancouver or via live stream for the Walrus Talks Philanthropy and at Changing Canada. 7 speakers will discuss how philanthropy and charities are evolving to meet the needs of the communities they serve. That's kind of building on what we were just talking about now. And then on Wednesday, November 19th, we'll be in Ottawa with YWCA Canada for the Walrus Talks Ending Gender-Based Violence. Join us in person at the National Gallery or by live stream for a national conversation for change. Okay, keep an eye on your inbox. You'll receive an email follow-up from the Walrus. And if you'd like to attend future events like this one and stay in touch with all that we do at the Walrus, we encourage you to opt into that newsletter via email. We have recorded this video, so if you'd like to share it, or maybe you're watching it on demand at this point, we will be posting it online. You can visit us at thewalrus.ca/events to watch videos from all of our talks in the Walrus Talks video room. It's online at our website. The Walrus is a registered charity, and it's powered by people like you. If you believe this moment we're in calls for deep, rigorous, clear-eyed reporting, please consider making a donation today. It's one thing you can do to help Canada stay strong with reporting available to everyone. You can donate to the Walrus at thewalrus.ca/to support to ensure that we can continue doing this work and producing events like this one. Thank you again to the Belonging Forum for their generous support. I want to say thank you to everyone who was in chat with your questions and reflections. It was popping all throughout the evening. We're looking forward to continuing this conversation in our Belonging series. Thank you to our annual sponsors, Air Canada, Bullfrog Power, Inspire, RBC, and Rogers. And thank you all for tuning in. Have a great evening.